We're going to take a look at a mix. This is a track of mine called Neptune Beach. It's from my Straight Up project, and let's take a listen to it, and we'll take a look at the mix. That's my friend Dave Weiss on the flute. He plays the woodwind book at the Lion King full time. He's been doing that since the show opened, and before that, he was with me at Miss Saigon. He did Miss Saigon for 7 or 8 years. Then he moved over to Lion King, and he did Into the Woods. Before that, he's on tons of jingles and film soundtracks. He's like the top ethnic flute player in the city, and he also plays regular flute really well. I'm playing keyboards, and there's other people on here. So let's look at how this is organized here. All these green tracks have to do with drums. And then I've got all of them routed through this purplish track here. That is an AUX track. So the outputs of these are routed to the inputs of these. And then these are all grouped into drums and percussion so that when I want to just listen to the drums, I can click on this VCA here, right? And I've gone over VCAs a little bit, and I can just listen to the drums. I typically set up my sessions so they look like a score, and on like a big band score, the drums are at the bottom of the page, but engineers like to have the drums at the top. And the reason for that is physical. In the old days, like the engineers that I work with, they actually worked in real studios with big consoles and tape machines and everything. And they've transitioned over the last 20 years into the digital world. And on a tape machine, usually track 24 on a 24-track tape machine is striped with time code so that you can synchronize things to the tape. And so you want to keep the drums as far away from that as possible so that there's no bleed between the tracks on the tape. So the first 8 or however many audio tracks you have for drums are typically on the far left side of the mixing console, tracks 1 through 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it is. So that got transferred over into this because if I were to show my mixer page right? You'll see that on the left, all the green tracks, these are my drums. So that corresponds to a hardware mixing console. And so the way the drums go is it's got kick drum, and then this is the snare drum, and there's actually 2 snare drum tracks. And what we did was we separated out, when we were mixing this, the snare drum, which is this one here, with the cross stick, which is here. And the reason you do that is so you have more control over the processing of the sound and also of the dynamics of it. And then below that, you've got your hi-hats. And then your toms. I've got all the toms just on 2 tracks. And then we've got our overheads. So that's 2 microphones above the drums. And this will sound pretty good. You know, with a little kick drum, that's too loud, but with a little bit of that track, you could almost use the overhead. Like a distorted mic in the room, like far away, right? It's got a little bit of edge on it. There's some percussion that comes in later on in the song, right here. And there's actually a loop blended in with the drums. So let's do this. So we'll hear the loop and the congas. So I've got that loop. In with the drums. That happens all the time. You layer in loops with live drums all the time in modern productions. Maybe not in jazz or big band, but in this kind of a piece. And then I've got below that, I've got my bass. And then below that, continuing on, I've got some electric guitars, and I've got these red tracks, 3 electric guitars, and I've got them panned. And then I've got the same thing. I've got them all routed through an aux track and then a VCA so that these are my guitar tracks. I can solo those out. Now, this is a trick that I do, and I clean up the stuff I don't need in between it. But I played the same thing, and I panned it left and right. In other words, this one right here is on the left. And then I did the same performance on the right. And you got your nice stereo guitar. And then this guitar up here. With some nice delay on it. Which is kind of cool. Then I've got down here, these bluish tracks are these are my keyboard tracks. Well, actually, these are my keyboard tracks. Right, and I've got them all through a VCA and a sub, just like the other tracks. So I've got an acoustic piano. Now you notice I'm not playing any chords with my left hand. I'm just playing the melody. I don't need to play chords because I've got my electric piano playing the chords. And that's like orchestration, right? I don't need to play extra things on the piano because I've got that all filled out and I've got that taken care of with the electric piano. And also I've layered in an organ with that as well. Let me mute the piano. You can hear how the Rhodes and the organ fit together. Change the registration by moving the drawbars around. Right, so the organ and the electric piano fit together like this. They create like an ensemble, a harmonic ensemble. The second time the intro comes in, I've got these wah-wah clavinets, which is kind of cool. Right, so this is playing kind of like a reggae rhythm on the organ. Boom, boom. And here's something I did that's kind of cool, I think, is that I'm playing the melody on the organ, this red track. I wasn't happy with that, so then I went back and I doubled it with a different sound so that you get a nice composite. So if I just played it with this red track and not this blue track, this is what it would sound like. Now when I add the blue track in, and then right here, I've got the flute coming in, so I don't need to have that high part on the organ anymore. The organ itself is a keyboard that I have. I've actually got like a Hammond organ clone down in the basement with two manuals and a Leslie and everything. But for this, I have a Yamaha YC61, which is a great gigging keyboard, and it's got beautiful Hammond sounds and Leslie simulation. So I recorded that, and I played that on here because it was easy to me to set it up, and it sounds great. So let's look at what I did for processing the organ sound, right? So I'm going to turn all of these things off. That sounds good. First thing I did was I used some EQ, right? And I got rid of some of the low end and some of the super high. It doesn't make a big difference, but I can hear it on my headphones. The next thing I did was I used this as a distortion. It adds some. It also adds some volume, but you can hear it also adds grit to the sound. This is a compressor that also does mid-side processing and makes the sound like it's actually coming from outside of the speakers. Hard to hear it probably over Zoom, but I can hear it on my headphones. And then the last thing was, this is a kind of a room reverb. It's a model of the Ocean Way Studios. Just makes it seem like it's in a room. Right, so that's pretty cool. Let's take a look at what I did to the clavinet. So it's a touch wah clavinet sound, which means that when I'm playing the keyboard, the harder I hit it, the more it goes wah, right? So you got to work around with your touch. But then I have it going through a delay. So it's a dotted eighth note, and it's panned all the way to the right. right? Because you can hear the clavinet is panned to the left. So, and then on it, I added this. This is a kind of a distortion effect, right? So if I bypass this, it's very polite. It's just a little bit of, I can really punish it. And just a little EQ. Oh, there's nothing. It's not even doing anything. It's just in there. But then this is some reverb, a plate reverb, right plugged right into it. Now, if you listen to Stevie Wonder and Herbie Hancock are great exponents of the clavinet sound, and that's what I was going for with this sound. And they use echoes, they use distortion, they use wah-wah pedals on it, all those effects. And it works out really well when you hear the aggregate of the electric piano and the organ. Oh, and then the other thing too is that at the end here, I've got this organ track, the pink one. And then I've got the second one, this blue one right below it. Right? There's no reason why you can't double it. I mean, you hear 2 or 3 guitars on records. Why can't you hear 2 or 3 organs? And then with the clavinet. And then add the electric piano in, which is this track here. Some chords on the piano. You can hear some Herbie Mann vibes. So let's take a look at what we're doing to the flute in terms of processing it. So the first thing is, let's turn off all the processing on the flute. So he recorded this at his house. Oh, there's a master here. So let's turn all these things off. Right, very dry. So the first thing is we're sending a reverb. And then the second reverb, a hall. So 2 reverbs, nice. And then there's some delay. And then at the beginning of the chain, we're adding some compression. Right, and this is a model of an old analog compressor, and you can really hear it gives it sort of like a vintage sound. And then getting rid of, he has a little funny sound in his room in the low end, so we just got rid of that. We don't need it. And then a second compressor. And it's not really doing anything, but this has a particular timbre, like a tube timbre, that they've modeled into there. And then another EQ just to bring out some of those high notes, right? So it's really like a lot of... Oh, this is, right? This is actually a compressor, I'm sorry. Right, so it's just compressing these high notes. I apologize. And then there's another multi-band compressor along the final thing, right? So all the stuff, like lots of little things adding up to making the sound fit in nicely with the entire track. Okay, now let's take a look at what we did with the bass. And this is not the usual guy I have playing. He wasn't available, so this is me playing bass on my keyboard. So I'm not. He's got it going through this something that does tape saturation. My friend, I did a lot of this mix, and my friend Ken came and did the last part of it. So let's turn all of these things off. Yeah, so that just adds some like tape compression and a little bit of saturation. And then this is adding some low end at 30 hertz and boosting at 5K, right? This is a Pultec EQ, which there should be one of these in your, if you're a Pro Tools artist, you should have something similar to this in your kit. And again, a multi-band compressor. It's just affecting the low notes, leaving the high notes, high frequencies unattenuated, and then this decapitator. Right, so if I turn the drive up, you'll really hear that. Right, it can really distort it, but we just want a little bit of that drive. Another compressor. Basically, it's doing a little bit of compression, but it gives you a certain timbre. There's just so much processing on this. It's actually a bit much for me, but that's the way it is. It fits in nicely with the drums, though. All right, so the thing to take from this is the way that it's that will be helpful for you is that this is how most recorded music that's done by professional engineers, it looks in the final version, right? You'll see that things are color coded, they're organized, they're in a certain order, and that you've got options that makes it very easy for you to solo different food groups or different instrument groups. For example, I just want to hear the drums. I just do the drums VCA. Boom. So now if I want to go here and I want to hear how my drums and my guitar sound. If I want to hear the drums and my keyboards. Right. So that's, and also the other thing that you notice is that there are these memory locations or markers all over here. The whole song is mapped out with this. Now, there is a window here called memory locations, right? And that brings up this little guy here. I've showed you this before. I typically leave this on my other monitor over there, so it's not in the way here, but we can leave this right here. And if we zoom in on this, you'll notice that these are all numbered. And I'm not sure why they're not in order. I have no idea about that. I don't remember because I did this like 2 years ago. But if I want to navigate to any part of these songs, let's say I want to go to this bridge, right? If I tap on my numerical keyboard, decimal point, the number, and decimal point, it will automatically jump to that spot on the score. So let's go back. So I'm at the I hit return. I'm all the way at the back at the beginning, and I want to go to this one. So decimal point 5, decimal point, and you see I'm now at measure 46. If I want to go back to verse 1, it's decimal point 7, decimal point. And what's really, so that's a great fast way to navigate throughout the session. And one thing that it's very useful for is making sure that the volumes between different sections are not very extreme. So in other words, I'm at measure 46. I'm going to go back to the first verse. I'm going to go to the outro. I'm going to go to the solo. I'm going to go to the intro. The outro. So that's like one of the big benefits of using the memory locations for this kind of music, right? In film scoring, I use it for a different reason. But for this kind of music, it's very helpful, and I definitely use markers all the time. And they're called memory locations in Pro Tools, but I think in Logic they're called markers. You can do all of this stuff in Logic. You don't have as much control over like aux tracks and VCA masters as you do in Pro Tools, but they are there and you can use them. And once you get used to using them, they're just as powerful as in Pro Tools. Logic has MIDI things that Pro Tools doesn't have. So, you know, there's like a give and take in between both programs. So for those of you that are mixing in Logic, all of my reverbs are down at the bottom here. And that's typically like on a mixing console, you'd have aux tracks all the way over to the far right-hand side that you could send to hardware, Lexicon and Sony and Yamaha reverb units, or your plate reverb, or your chambers, if you have like a chamber in your recording studio. So they just sort of kept the convention and sort of transferred it into this digital realm.